city that never sleeps, a lone guitarist makes his leaps. Fingers dance, strings sing a tale of a dream that feels so frail. Echoes fill the silent night. A lost love, a heart so tight. But in this cold, hard world, hope's just a fleeting word. Oh, trees whisper, oh, trees sigh. In the darkness they take flight. Heartbreak echoes, lonely cry. In the cold, hard light, guitar soars through the stormy skies. A melody that pierces the eyes. Love's a memory, a distant dream. In this world it seems. Fingers glide in the fading light. A final note, a last good night. Lost in the shadows, lost in time. Dreams are all we find. Oh, dreams whisper, oh, dreams sigh. In the darkness they take flight. Heartbreak echoes, a lonely cry. In the cold, hard light.
In the shadows where whispers dwell,
1.3.
slight guitar sings of love's farewell.
I just wanted to know if
Echoes of the heart once bold, now lost in the night's cold fold.
Yeah, I'll be 23 back on that
Secrets hidden
property
deep
kid. I'll be 76
within,
of those Williams Road address.
tales of love that couldn't win, promises made in moonlight's glow, now broken like a shattered show. Sorrow in the guitar's cry, resilience in the sky. Through the night we'll find our way, carrying secrets, holding on today. Memories of laughter and tears, in the silence they appear. Whispers of a time so true, when love was all we knew. Lost in the echoes of the past, wishing for what we had. In the dark we search for light, holding on to what we fight. Through the pain, through the night, we find strength in the fight. Sorrow in the guitar's cry, resilience in
parking problem. Foreigner 23. Yeah, 428 on Troy when you're ready.
Okay, everybody, good evening. Thanks for being here at Yellow Cottage Tales this evening. And remember, starting this past Monday and from now on, we're doing a show every Monday through Friday at 8 o'clock. We'll be on usually with my co-host, Margaret McLean, but certainly with a guest. Margaret is out fishing today. She is an avid sports person, and she caught, yet again, a giant tuna today. That's the update I have from Margaret McLean, is she caught a giant tuna today. Now, my special guest tonight is Judge Carol Erskine, who, if there's one word that you're going to remember about Carol, is passion. She is very passionate about the case we're going to discuss tonight, which is the Harmony Montgomery case, which is it's a difficult case to discuss without having a tear come to your eye. I mean, it's just, we saw this poor child's face in the news over and over again for a long time, a couple of years ago, until her father was ultimately convicted. Just a horrible, horrible case. But there's so much more that goes into the story. And fortunately, that's a story that never would have been told. But fortunately, it's been told and is being told by Judge Carol Erskine. And I have questions for her. And she also has, so the name of her book, before we bring Carol in, is called A Cruel Injustice. So you can find this on Amazon. It's called A Cruel Injustice by Judge Carol Erskine. In addition, she has a website called The Justice File, where she is continuing to stay on state and federal authorities to try to keep their feet to the fire, to keep the pressure on them, to try to bring justice to these children. So let me bring in Carol now. Carol, hi, good evening.
Hey, good evening. Nice to see you, Kevin. Thanks for having me on.
We've talked several times on the phone, and definitely, you know, Carol really brings the passion about this case and other cases every time we talk. But now, with the Karen Reed stuff all washed up, we finally get to focus on the case, which you've done more than anybody else to bring to light. So I want to begin just by letting you take us through the story in the way you want to, and I'll save my questions for later. So take us through, I guess, however you want to begin with you had some role in the early going in this case, or wherever you want to go with this.
Sure. I mean, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this case, aside from the fact that Harmony was so mistreated by Massachusetts and New Hampshire, is that in 2019, December 7th, 2019, when we found out that Harmony was murdered, of course, it was over 2 years before we knew that. But I think one of the interesting facts that people don't know is that 2 weeks before that, on National Adoption Day, in my courtroom when I was still on the bench, I finalized the adoption of little Jameson Miller to his dads, Jonathan and Blair Miller. And Jameson is the half-brother of Harmony Montgomery. So in 2021...
So the half-brother through the father, right?
Half-brother through the mom. He is not Adam Montgomery's son.
He's not Adams. Okay. All right.
No,
All right.
and actually in the case, which was actually litigated, the termination of parental rights case, which ended in an open adoption agreement. In that particular case, the father was never named, and so there was just a general termination of rights of the father of Jameson. And but Jameson is Crystal Sorey's son, and biologically. And so I did that adoption. It was an amazing day. It was just a pleasure to be able to finalize the adoption. I didn't hear the case in Boston, but the Chief Justice allowed me to finalize it because I'd come to know Blair and Jonathan in 2017 when Blair spoke at National Adoption Day.
So maybe we should try to take, since there's probably a lot of people in the audience, especially in the audience, people outside of Massachusetts, and even some in Massachusetts who don't know the basic outlines of this case. So Harmony, I should have brought, I could bring a picture up if I'm trying to talk at the same time. So it kind of throws me off. I'll bring one up next time
Sure.
when, I'll bring it up when the judge is talking. So Harmony was born on June 7th in 2017. And in the first 4 years of her life, she did not live with her father. And she seems to have barely even met him, right? So she was, but both the parents. So Adam is the father, and Crystal Sorey is the mother, and they're both drug addicts.
Mhm.
And correct me if I get anything wrong here. So the mother had custody initially, and then she lost custody and Harmony very quickly. I
Yeah,
think 2 months.
yeah.
I think Harmony was only 2 months old, and Crystal lost custody. And so Harmony was raised in a series of foster families up until she was 4 years old. And Adam, for some reason, wanted custody, probably to get the drug pay. The government payments, right? I'm assuming to fuel his drug habit. Is that a fair assumption,
Yeah,
Carolyn?
I think it's a fair assumption. I think he also wanted to get custody just to sort of tuck it to Crystal, because by that time they had such an antagonistic relationship. She was born in 2014 and Jameson 2016. You are correct. She spent 4 years and 8 months in and out of foster care. She went into foster care as you say, at about 2 months of age, and then was returned back to the mom at some point. Mom relapsed. They actually then took Harmony away again. She was with the mother for a period of 6 or 7 months. They returned her again, and she was with the mother for maybe 10 months. And after 10 months, she relapsed again. So all in all, in 4 years and 8 months, she was with the mom for about 15 months. She was never with the father and never had an unsupervised visit with the father. They were both determined by the court to be unfit, but they had a right to review that because their parental rights weren't terminated. And that's where the trial comes in.
And he was in prison too for most of that time, right?
Well, he was in prison initially when she was born, and he was in prison for a good year and a half of that 4 years and 8 months. And then he sort of disappeared for a period of time. Nobody really knew where he was. He wasn't visiting. He actually had supervised visits and only visited her 20 times in 4 years and 8 months. And so it's just a shocking, just a shocking turn of events that he was awarded custody.
So you're saying his primary reason for wanting to get her was to stick it to his ex-girlfriend, her mother. And then as we'll see, I think a little bit in the story, they lived. So he goes on to get remarried. And again, his new wife is like him. They're still addicted to drugs. They're in a very poor house that no doubt was paid for by the government, but they used the money on drugs. So they got evicted, and they're living in his car for a period of time. And they've got 3 kids. So Harmony, and then the 2 boys from the other marriage were living in the back seat. And this is where some of Harmony's medical problems or psychomedical problems started developing too. And this is also when he seems to have started beating her. Just completely. So I'm looking at this saying, why would you want to live in your car with 3 kids? But it's because they were getting I'm thinking it's because they were getting the money from the government, the welfare money, and they were using the SNAP money to pay for the drugs.
They continued to use that money after he killed her. That was the original thing that Caleb Montgomery was arrested for. But he was beating her and basically tormenting her almost from the time he had her. And, there's, of course, the story of what happened in Massachusetts is in the book, and how he came to have custody, which in itself is a travesty because a lot of evidence wasn't presented to the judge. And I'm very critical of the Committee for Public Counsel Services system that allowed attorneys not to protect her. But when she got to New Hampshire, it was very soon after she got to New Hampshire that he began tormenting her, having her scrub the floors with a toothbrush, putting her in a corner for hours. In July 20th. Yeah.
So it was more than just so this was much more than just a reaction of like a guy that's out of control and losing his temper because she wet the bed or something like that. This is someone that when you're punishing her in that kind of way, it's more of a premeditated kind of. You're not just doing it when you're losing, when you're losing your mind and taking a mental fit. You're torturing this girl as a way of life.
I mean, there were 17. Well, after the initial filing of the child abuse report, there were 17 reports from neighbors and relatives calling DCYF saying she's being beaten, she's being tormented, she's being isolated. They didn't put her in school. He made sure that she wasn't in school. He made sure she never saw a doctor. She had multiple medical problems. She was born with a condition called septo-optic dysplasia, which caused her to be blind in one eye and have some other related neurological problems. And she needed ophthalmological care. She was supposed to have surgery. He made sure she never saw a doctor. I mean, basically, they isolated her, and he tormented that little girl almost every day of her life.
Right. And what I saw too is all of those things were to a degree treatable, but they had to be treated, and she had to be in serious, protective care. So she needed to be in with a family that could support that and get her to that care that she needed, that she would have got, and both for the eye and for the psychological aspect of which were all related to the same condition. Is that your own? Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the problems in Massachusetts, and I think they just wanted to maybe get her out of the state, was because she had been in and out of foster care. She had been with a lovely family all 3 times. But by the end of it, they weren't providing the necessary therapy. And she had, obviously trauma. And because they weren't providing her with therapy, she was acting out. And I've spoken directly to the foster mother. They just weren't able to keep her there. They wanted her to be in a therapeutic foster home. Massachusetts didn't provide that. So they sent this little girl who was traumatized, had medical issues, had vision issues, completely falls under the Americans with Disabilities Act, who wasn't getting, at least she was getting medical care and schooling in Massachusetts. Right. But in New Hampshire, I don't even know how to describe what happened to her in New Hampshire. I've described it as torture, torment, and just isolation. I've written about it, and I analogized it to the Eighth Amendment. It was like cruel and unusual punishment. She was basically tormented, tortured, beaten, and just had, severe bruising. And then, of course, it got worse when they were living in the car, and he was just pounding her and beating her every day. She was covered with bruises from head to toe. And they got stopped by the police once, and he covered her with a blanket so they couldn't see it. So there were lots of opportunities missed in New Hampshire, and she died as a result of those missed opportunities.
So it's fun, it's interesting to me. Couple interesting things to note there. One is that, so when I used to be years ago in a writing group in Andover, and there was the best writer in our group was a woman who worked for DCF in Lawrence, obviously a tough city to be working in, right?
For
a lot
sure.
of problems there. And she was our best writer, and all those stories that she did were fictionalized accounts of true things that she encountered on the job. And she was a great person, a great woman. And my sense from her and what she was dealing with in Lawrence was that just the department was overwhelmed. It just did not have the resources to handle the number of people coming through the system with such really terrific problems. But I do remember her going into some of these cases where there was a great reluctance to want to break up families. And I didn't hear anything. Now your angle is that a lot of this is financially motivated. So maybe we should go into that a little bit. And then the other thing I wanted to, just in case I forget, it sounds like you think, or you're saying the problems in New Hampshire are different than the problems in Massachusetts. They each have their own set of problems, but they may be a little bit different. But so if you could answer those two or address those two issues. Okay.
So regarding the problems in Massachusetts, she was well cared for in foster care. And, the case fell apart when it went into court, and lawyers just presented. The child's lawyer basically said she wants to live with her father, and that's the position that she took. And so the problem in Massachusetts is essentially nobody represented her best interest. And so they kept information from the judge about the father's criminal record, never came into evidence. Nothing came into evidence about her special needs and what she needed. She was allowed to go to New Hampshire without an interstate compact agreement, which is an agreement that the case would be followed in New Hampshire by a social worker for 6 months. The judge allowed that to happen. And so that was the problem there. When she got to New Hampshire, the first involvement with DCF came on July 29th, 2019, when they got a call that saying she had a severe black eye. And a terrible series of events occurred there. And the most serious of which was that by law in New Hampshire, it required an immediate response, not only by a social worker to see this, because it was the uncle who called it in and said he's beating her, he's punching her in the eye, she has a severe black eye. They immediately dispatch a social worker, and by law, the social worker has to be in touch with the police. That's the law in New Hampshire when there's a sexual assault or a physical assault. And what happened was the social worker went there and reported to the police and to the supervisors that he saw Harmony and that there was no black eye. Unfortunately for him, when the trial came, he couldn't lie about that. When the trial came, he admitted that he drove up and saw Adam Montgomery, who he said he knew, drive away with a little girl and never saw her. And so he actually contacted the police and said, because he had to by law, and said, I saw the children, he said, no bruises or marks. And so what we find out later, and what is part of my complaint when I recently met with the FBI, is that the social worker basically said he saw her. That's what the governor reported in the governor's report. And of course, we know that didn't happen. And what the family made very clear, and what we know now, is that the social worker knew Adam Montgomery. He was his youth counselor when Adam Montgomery was in the detention unit. And
so he should have recused himself. And were there any repercussions for all of his actions and misdeeds here?
Well, we don't know, because, DCF does not want to release that information. What we do know from his testimony at the trial is that at some point, I think when this all started coming out, he left DC. He left DCYF and works at the post office, according to his testimony. But the interesting thing that's been written about him is he started off as a police officer, and then was removed from that. He had a domestic, or more than one domestic. It was written about in an article in New Hampshire, and was decertified as a police officer. And his union then moved him to the Department of Youth Services, or it's the
very last place he should go.
Yeah, and he goes to the Department of Youth Services, where he becomes Adam Montgomery's youth counselor. And then there were allegations of sexual harassment there. And however it turned out, they decided, the union said, okay, we need to transfer him to get him somewhere else. And where did they put him? In the department as an investigator in the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, where he's assigned to investigate the injury to Harmony, and then reported, according to the governor's report and the report filed by DCF, the DCYF administration, comes right out and says he saw Harmony at the car with Adam Montgomery. He examined her. And there were no bruises. And the email they have, of course, the email has been documented where he said there were no bruises. And of course, we knew that she had a severe black eye. And so the problem is, if that had happened on July 29th, she still would have been alive, because the police would have arrested him for the assault, in my opinion, and she would have been moved to foster care. But that didn't happen because he didn't see her until August 7th. The injury happened on July 22nd, so it was 19 days later when he finally went to the house. And by the way, called them to say, I'm coming. So, all of these things happen. Interesting, the question, everyone was asking was, why is it that Adam Montgomery happened to be leaving, picked up Harmony and happened to be leaving with her the moment the social worker pulled up to the house? And the answer is from Kayla Montgomery is they got a call saying he was coming. Sorry.
That's all right. I had the same button. I was trying to cough and I was looking for the button that I have to hit.
Yeah.
I was like, am I hitting this right? I don't want to cough on the air. This picture that I, excuse me, see, it's still there. It's like a little frog in my throat tonight. This picture that I have on the screen, do you know when this was taken? Was this taken, how old was she, or what, was this before she was in Adam's custody or after?
Yes, yeah, I think that picture was a school picture. And I think it comes from the foster mother just before she was moved. So I would say
Hmm.
she was probably about 4 years. And she was born in June. So it was probably taken 5 months later, for a school picture. So she was probably, 4 years and 6 months or something around there.
Makes the tragedy so much more worse because look
Oh,
how she's not obviously not only a beautiful little girl, but she looks so happy here,
mm,
and there's no bruises on her or anything. And then 5 months later, the state of New Hampshire changed her life for the worse and ruined her, and ultimately led to her death by decisions that, what's the best way to reform these decisions? Is it a bureaucratic nightmare? Is it bad rules? Is it over? Is it just that they're overwhelmed? Is it bad people being promoted or put in the wrong positions? How do we start? How do we even start to fix this? Obviously, the main way to start is to do what someone like you are doing in pointing out the specific problems that have to be addressed in the abuses. But how do we address it on a more system-wide basis to prevent these things from happening, or at
yeah,
least reduce them?
it's a great question. I mean, I think some of the problems in terms of the system is that up until 2018, under the Adoption and Safe Families Act, federal funding would go to the states to assist them with getting foster placements and adoption. But that changed in 2018 under different administration to the Safe Families Act, where they shifted the funds to the states in order to keep kids at home with families. And the problem with that is, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that if reunification is appropriate. I mean, I heard thousands of child abuse cases. I mean, literally thousands. Sexual abuse, physical abuse, substance use, domestic violence, murder, suicides, leaving children behind. I mean, I've heard thousands of cases. There are just some cases where kids cannot be reunified with parents. And, the current trend is thinking that somehow that all kids can be reunified or that they shouldn't be removed in the first place. And that's
Right.
just not reality. For anyone who actually works in the field or has to hear cases and make decisions like I had to make, regarding children, the truth of the matter is some kids need to be in foster care and freed for adoption, but that's not
Right.
where the money is. The money is
Right.
not there. So that's part of the problem.
Right. Yeah. So explain why the money is not there and what exactly happened to what change made that take place.
Yeah, it was the change in law in 2018, because
2018. Right.
because the department would get money to just sort of move these kids to permanency as quickly as they could, if they couldn't be reunified. And so there was funding to assist with foster care and adoption.
Right.
Once
Right.
the law changed and they don't have money, then what happens in the states? The states are like, okay, well, we have to reunify. We can't be taking kids out. I mean, you saw recent cases in New York,
Right.
horrible cases of kids that have been left alone, that are starving, some that were left alone for days on end, severely
Right.
abused. And DCF in New York knew about it, and they just kept leaving those kids at home. The philosophy changed, and I don't have any issue with reunifying kids when they can be reunified and the parents are
Right.
okay,
Right.
but that's not the way it is.
Right. Sorry if I seem distracted there. My dad was having a problem with his TV. Now my dad is 83, and when your 83-year-old dad is having with a problem with his TV at night, that's the end of the world, right? So fortunately for him, the Red Sox already played this afternoon. They played
Yeah,
and they won.
good,
But
right.
they played a 1 o'clock game. But that's why I was looking away. I was like, all right, try
Yeah,
this,
no,
Dad.
no.
Try this.
Yeah, no worries at all.
Are your parents still alive?
No, my parents passed away several years ago. They were avid sports fans, especially my mother.
Yeah.
My mother was like an
Yeah.
avid football fan. And, when my husband and I were younger and before we had all these kids around, we had season tickets to the Red Sox and would go all the time. So,
Oh,
Yeah.
Now, I think it mentioned on your website that you're adopted, right? Did I
I
get that
am
wrong?
not adopted, but my kids are adopted.
Oh, you adopted kid. That's what it was. All right.
I have
So
two
that's all.
stepkids and two adopted kids who are now in their 20s.
So maybe all the more reason why you feel so passionate about this case. You've seen the system from a different side and realized that Harmony could have been put easily into a loving family, and instead she was pushed back into a relationship with her dad, who was just getting out of prison or had just gotten out of prison, a year or so before, and it was a drug addict and had a lot of issues. And then and then she was unmonitored. She probably shouldn't have been put back with him in the first place. But if she was, it should have been only if he could be super closely monitored to make sure he wasn't having the same problems. But they
Mhm.
didn't monitor him. And then
Right.
even when they got reports that he was abusing her and certainly signs, the fact that he wasn't paying his rent and getting evicted and stuff like that, there were all kinds of warning signs here that she should have been taken out. And so, but nobody was looking out for this kid.
Everybody
And
knew.
it didn't have to be. It didn't have to be.
Everybody knew. The thing is, the person that was on the case was the social worker who knew Adam. And I spoke with the uncle who made multiple calls every day. He would call them every day saying, why isn't she removed? And,
Right.
heartbroken. It's heartbreaking to
Relatable.
talk to him and to the foster mother. And he even called them saying, why do you have this social worker on the case? He knows Adam. He's known him for 15 years. And when he testified, when the social worker testified at the trial, what did he say? He said, I drove up to the house and I saw a person that I knew was Adam Montgomery. So at the time I said to myself, how did he know that, since it was the first call?
Mhm.
And so it turns out that he had known, according to the grandmother, who said, he's known Adam for 15 years. According to the uncle I spoke to, because when I was doing my research and preparing a complaint, to the FBI and to the U.S. attorney for federal charges, I spoke with the foster mom and I spoke with the uncle, and they're just devastated by this. I mean, the foster mother was contacting New Hampshire saying she has doctor's appointments. I'll come and drive her. But nothing happened. I mean, Adam Montgomery isolated her. Kevin Montgomery tried to take her out once to Duncan's,
Mhm.
and Adam called and said, don't you ever take her out of that house. And so, they basically isolated her. And the only person really seeing her who would be like a reporter of abuse was the social worker who knew Adam Montgomery. And when he did see her, he saw her in the house. This is a social worker. You don't interview a child. You never
Right.
interview a child in the house with the abusers. It's like
Right.
I've characterized it this way the whole time that I've been on this case. And the way I characterize it is that everything that could go wrong for Harmony did go wrong. And, it is just, it's one of the reasons that I stay on it. And, we're pushing. I'm working with the two dads. We've met with a congressman and we've met with legislators to try to make changes in the law so it doesn't happen again. But it's Kevin, it's hard. As you know, lawmakers, kids don't vote is what I always say. So
Right. Why do you think? So back when the father was initially trying to get custody, his lawyer told the court that she wanted to live with the dad. Is that reliable? Is that something he pressured her to say? Did she feel pressured to say? Do we know the circumstances of that? Is there any way to know the circumstances of that?
yeah, I do know the circumstances. It was in the Office of the Child Advocate report. So in Massachusetts has this a system that I've always railed against, even as a judge, because all children get a lawyer, and Harmony was appointed a lawyer, and then there was a lawyer appointed for the father and a lawyer for the mother. They were indigent, so the agency that provides those lawyers is the Committee for Public Counsel Services, and so and they have some permanent lawyers who are on salary, and the rest of the lawyers are private lawyers who take the cases by contract. So my big issue with it is that you have three lawyers, and of course then there's the DCF lawyer who didn't do a very good job on this case. And so you have three lawyers all from the same agency on the case. The lawyer for the mother, lawyer for the father, the lawyer for the child are all paid for, hired by, supervised, trained, and overseen by the same agency and by the same people. And so I have always said this is a terrible, terrible system we have here. There should be a totally separate agency just for the children. And so lots of times in cases, I would appoint a guardian ad litem to tell me what was in the best interest of the child because I didn't always believe what the lawyer said. But in Massachusetts, children can tell a lawyer what they want, and that's what the lawyer has to represent, which is why the governor at the time, Governor Baker, said, we're going to appoint a guardian ad litem to tell a judge what's in the best interest of a child, separate of a lawyer. And of course, the CPCS is fighting against it. And so according to the lawyer, it's a very interesting story because if you have a child that's really young or a baby or whatever, and you're a lawyer, you can substitute. There's a legal doctrine called substituted judgment. So the lawyer said, Harmony wanted to go with her father, and because she was young, I aligned my substituted judgment evaluation with that and represented that she should go with the father. Well, here's the question I asked about that. So how did you make that evaluation? Did you look at it and say, Harmony, as I write in the book, do you want to go with this man that shot someone in the head and was in jail? Do you want to go with this man that has a 10-year history of stabbing people, pushing people out of the car, who's a drug user, who didn't visit you for 4 years and 8 months, except 20 times? My question is, how did the lawyer come to that decision? But I will tell you, Kevin, that the interesting thing about that story is that's not what CPCS said in a confidential private memo that I got a hold of.
And who is CPS? Child Protective Services.
That's the lawyer agency.
Okay.
So
All right.
the agency lawyers. And so they sent a memo to the Office of the Child Advocate when the Office of the Child Advocate was investigating. And they said, look, Harmony, if the child wanted to go with the father, and that was the lawyer's obligation to represent. So they said two different things. One, well, I substituted my judgment for her, but in the private memo before it all came out and before the investigation came out, they had strictly said, no, she wanted to go with her father. And then they said, if this 4-year-old wanted to go with her father expeditiously, then the lawyer had an obligation to represent that there be no follow-up in New Hampshire. It's a stunning, stunning story. I tell it in detail in the book how the legal system worked and how it worked against her. And, it's one of the things we're trying to change, but I don't know, whether that will happen. But again, everything in Massachusetts worked against her, which is why I wrote the reason I wrote the book is because the two dads said to me, what happened? Explain to us what happened. And so I said, okay, I'm going to research this. I'm going to try to figure out what happened. And then not only did I write the book, but they have 4 chapters in the book where I asked them questions, sort of about their life and about Jameson and how is he doing. And so they were contributors to the book.
Yes.
And that's how it came to be.
So again, we're with Judge Carol Erskine, who's the author of the book, A Cruel Injustice. So you can find that on Amazon, A Cruel Injustice by Judge Carol Erskine, Erskine.
Well,
Carol's
you're kind to do that. I will tell you, just so you know, that since the book's been out for for a year next month, we donate every single cent of the royalties of the profits to the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption.
Yes, I should have mentioned that. I did.
Oh yeah,
that.
No problem.
And Carol is very humble, so she is someone that prefers you call her Carol instead of Judge. But
thank you for that.
Was a judge, and then she's earned that title, and she's definitely earned it in this book. So I have a question about foster families, since I know really nothing about the subject. Why was she with several foster families? Does it work like if you find one foster family, if you're suitable with them and you're happy and it works? Do they keep you with that foster family for a number of years, or do they automatically look to move you around? Or why was she with several in her short life of years?
Well, she was lucky that she went back and forth with the same, except in the end. So she was in 2 different foster families, but and it's very traumatic. But you are correct. I mean, the last case that I had as a judge, which was a young teenage boy who was involved in, was leaving a residential program, had been in multiple foster families, and he was on the run, and they picked him up on the car case, and he came into court, and I said, tell me about yourself. Like, what's your story? Well, he had been in foster care since he was 6. He was in countless foster homes. Some people just stopped, saying they didn't want to be foster parents anymore. There were a number of reasons that happens. And also, Harmony was lucky, but a lot of kids aren't. Let's say they send the DCF says, okay, we're going to send the child back home, and the child goes home, like with Crystal. And when the child went home with Crystal, or the child goes home with a parent, and then they have to pull the child out again, then once they pull the other child out, they pull the child out for another time. It depends on whether that foster family still has an opening, because by that time they have other foster children in the home, and you can only have so many. There's a limit to the number of foster homes you can have, and in terms of children. And so a lot of children go home and then go to another foster home because the previous foster home couldn't take them for some reason, or because they were already full. So there aren't enough foster homes. I mean, it's just a terrible, terrible situation.
So Adam had 2 other children, and those were both with his new wife, right? And
correct.
Ultimately, when his beating went too far and he killed Montgomery, killed Harmony, the wife helped her cover up. Talk about the circumstances of what happened with Harmony after she was beaten to death.
Yeah, I mean, he they were all living in the car. And, Harmony was the one being beaten. The other 2 children were younger than Harmony. One was not much more than a baby. And even though there were calls
were
that
they boys? Were they boys or girls? Sorry to interrupt you. There was
boys.
Two boys, and they're both younger.
A girl.
So she's the oldest. Okay, all right. She's the oldest.
Yeah, but yes. So the boys. There was certainly neglect, because there was substance use in the homes. There were firearms in the homes. He was convicted of that a year before the murder. But there was no indication by any family member who called in these reports that he was physically abusing them, but they were neglected just by the use of substances. And they were both using fentanyl. And of course, then the home got foreclosed on. It was the grandmother's home, so she allowed them to have the home. And the home was a disaster. They didn't have electricity. They were just terrible, all kinds of terrible things going on in that home. I mean, it was just a complete mess, which was so difficult for Harmony, because she had trouble negotiating around furniture and things like that because of her neurological disability. Yeah. And so it was very difficult. So then they're living in the car. It's around Thanksgiving. She's so traumatized by his abuse that she's wetting her pants in the car, and he's screaming at her. And this is going on and on until that December 7th day. He's literally screaming at her, "Shut the F up," as she's crying. And he's reaching behind the seat and punching her in the head over and over again. According to Kayla Montgomery's testimony, her legs were all bruises, and he was just punching her in the head. She's crying, and he's saying, "Shut up, shut the F up." Of course, this is the testimony, and then you hear a moan, and then she stops, and then he says, "Oh my God." I think he says to Kayla, I think I did something. He pulls over in the car. He takes her out of the car. He realizes she's dead. He doesn't, at this point, he's in a panic. He goes to the back of the car, and he takes an Under Armour bag out, and he folds her body into the Under Armour bag and puts her in that bag. And
she's probably a little bit smaller in size than her age because of her condition, right? I think it affects
growth. She
growth.
was tiny. Yeah, good point. She was definitely tiny. And then of course, there's 3 months where he takes her body and crushes it. First, he freezes her, and then he unfreezes her in a tub, and they hide her in a ceiling at a homeless shelter. And then the worst of it is, and after he crushes her remains and puts them in a tote bag, he wants to freeze it. And so he's working at like a pizza place that has a kitchen. This came out at trial. And he then calls Kayla and says, get the tote bag and bring it here. And she then puts the tote bag in a carriage with the two other little children and pushes the carriage to the pizza place, where he then puts the tote bag in a freezer. And I mean, it's so horrific. And he hid her body in numerous places. And then months later in March, he rents a U-Haul. He gets a friend to rent a U-Haul, and he drives the U-Haul into Boston. They clocked it over the Tobin Bridge, and he disposed of her remains somewhere, they think, around an area in Boston, around the Rumney Marsh, around the Saugus area, where it was a kind of an area where he's from, but her remains have never been found.
Right.
But I'm telling you, that child was literally tortured in that car over and over again until she finally died, which is, one of the reasons that I decided, after there was a settlement in the civil case, so all this information doesn't come out, that I then decided I was going to put together a complaint under federal law to go after DCYF and its employees.
Unbelievable. I mean, thank you so much for all the work you're doing on this, because
Thanks.
we can only hope that it makes a difference. And there's really, I'm sure there are some other people doing a lot of work on this, but you don't really see a lot on it. So have you been getting local Boston media coverage on this, like on Channel 5, Channel 4, or any of that? I mean, you really, they should be giving you the coverage.
I've had, a lot of coverage. Kerry Kavanaugh received actually an Emmy Award for her coverage of the case. So I had been on quite a few times with her. And yes, when I filed a federal complaint for violation of Harmony's constitutional and civil rights, her due process and what we call substantive due process rights. And so I filed under federal law. I drafted a 40-page complaint with 110 factual allegations, and then outlined the law, which laws they violated. They knew of the law, because under this particular law, you have to show that what they did was willful and with knowledge of the law. So I had to detail extensively the law and how it related to violation of her due process rights. So I just said, well, I'm going to drive up to New Hampshire. I was on my way up to New Hampshire anyway. And so I said, I'm going to stop at the FBI. And so Blair Miller, as you may know, he's an anchor and reporter right now in Atlanta. He's the anchor, the evening anchor, and long history, and has a history in Boston. And so he helped me write a press release, and we put out the press release saying that I was going to be filing with the FBI for a federal civil rights action. And he sent it to all the news stations. And then I started getting calls from everybody. And so I did interviews with just about everybody. And of course, WMUR, they were actually there in New Hampshire when I got to the FBI. It was interesting because the press release came out. I had already contacted the FBI 2 weeks prior saying, I want to file a complaint under, and I said the law, it's called 18 USC section 242, which is the law that I filed it under, and gave them the details. And then they said they would refer it to the office in New Hampshire. And then the press release came out, and I was getting ready to come up to New Hampshire. And I got a call from the FBI saying, will you meet with us? And so we drove up to New Hampshire. I think it was July 1st. We drove up to New Hampshire, and I met with the FBI. I handed them my 40-page complaint detailing the law and the facts, and attached all the exhibits, and then overnighted a copy to the U.S. Attorney. I also sent a copy to the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., and I've actually heard from them saying that they've actually referred it to the Department of Health and Human Services.
Oh, good.
So for action through HHS. I don't think I'll hear from the only way I could hear from the FBI is if the U.S. attorney decides after an investigation to get a grand jury indictment. So, because once you file it, that's it. It's confidential, and whether they do something or
Right.
not, it'll be up to them. But that's
We'll
where
never know. Yeah.
Yeah, we won't know
We'll
unless
never know until they do indict someone. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So.
All right. Well, is there anything else that I missed that you'd like to go into, Carol?
No, I think that pretty much. I think that pretty much covers it all. You know, I have obviously great hopes. I've had so much support from people. You know, not only like you, but people on Twitter. You know, you and I have texted a number of times. You know, we were doing that at times through the Karen Reed case.
Right.
And,
right.
You know, and sometimes we agreed, sometimes we didn't. But you know,
Some of my
really,
great behind-the-scenes legal advice comes from Judge Carol Erskine, folks. So back when I had a much bigger, you know, I would have like 1,500, 1,600 people live for some of those shows during the trial, you know.
Oh yeah.
So some of my legal advice would come from people like Judge Carol Erskine and a couple of other lawyers. And now that I have Margaret working with me, she's a former prosecutor from Lawrence, so I have another lawyer. But for a while, Judge Carol was one of my main legal sources. We'd call up and say, "Hey, all right, how does this work?"
Yeah. Which it was always great to have those conversations, you know, whether we agreed or not. But, you know, I'm always there for you for sure. And
Thank you.
I hope you're doing well, by the way. So, yeah.
And if you need advice as to how to make if you need advice as to how to make a Bloody Mary or a Long Island iced tea, please call me. Or a margarita, I got that stuff. I got all that stuff down. It's been many years since I've made them, but
Oh, you know, that's funny. You have a great show, you know, and I think it's done a lot of good. I'm happy to see the Karen Reed case come to an end. It was stressful.
Oh, that'll never end. It'll never end.
It's going on today.
The civil trial's coming up. Yeah, she was on Howie Carr, and there's a civil case. The civil case comes up, I think, in September. Fortunately, I don't. So actually, here's another legal question there. Are cameras allowed in civil court? I don't think they are, right?
Oh yeah, of course they are. Yes,
they are.
Yes. Oh yeah. I mean, in Massachusetts, you know, they're public because it's not federal, so they are allowed. But I don't think anybody will see anything for 2 or 3 years because discovery. First of all, there's multiple plaintiffs in that case. You know, because the bars are there, and she's also, of course, a plaintiff. I don't even think they've begun discovery. So even though there are tracking orders in Massachusetts, I mean, I've been in Massachusetts and in the court system for a long time. I don't think I've ever seen a civil case, especially one like that, and a wrongful death come up in less than 3 or 4 years, you know, because not only do you have extensive discovery, there are motions to dismiss that have to be heard because people are going to.
All right. So let me say I must have been wrong then when I said that the trial is in September. This is based on a Channel 5 report today. They said Alan Jackson said he'll be in court for September. So it must be just the next hearing on this case.
Yeah, you know, there's lots of pretrial hearings. There's motions to dismiss. I don't think they've done interrogatories yet. Discovery. Right. Then there's, as I said, there's motions to dismiss. There's pretrial issues, and then there are summary judgments that people will be asking for. I don't see that trial happening for 2 to 3 years anyway.
2 to 3 years. Okay.
Yeah. And I also think Karen Reed will file a Section 1983 claim in federal court. I think that's what they were talking about. It's a violation of, again, it's a constitutional violation of rights that they'll file against either the prosecutor or the police or both. You know, I mean, the first element of a Section 1983 claim, the very first element is, that you were prosecuted and that you were found innocent, that you were found not guilty. So, we'll talk about that some other time if you want. But I do think, the Section 1983 claim will come up. I get traumatized when I hear about that because in law school, we had to write a brief in the first year of law school, and the case was a Section 1983 claim. Uh-huh. So I was thinking
would that be the same or so? Howie Carr asked Alan Jackson today if they planned on suing the DA Morrissey, and would that be the same as what you're talking, or something different about that?
Yeah, I think. There? Well, I mean, there are civil cases, that can be filed in state courts for things like malicious prosecution. But I think the direction they're going in is to not be in the state of Massachusetts at all, except in a federal courtroom. A federal courtroom,
Right.
it might be located in Massachusetts, but it's all federal law. And my belief is they'll file a Section 1983 claim for violation of constitutional and civil rights. And that's the direction I think that they're talking about. They haven't come out and said it, but just based on the way they're talking about it, and so then you have a whole different set of discovery, because they would be going after, they'd go after state police or whoever they think is involved. So I think that's coming. I don't know.
They
haven't
know who's
said-
involved. They know exactly who did it.
Well,
Certainly Karen knows. I'll tell you that. Karen knows.
I'm just saying in terms of the type of prosecution, and
Right.
basically what the attack will be is kind of on the investigation and defects in the investigation.
right.
So yeah,
Right,
we
as-
could talk
as a-
about
as
that
a legal
sometime.
maneuver. Sure.
Let's see what
Absolutely.
happens. Let's see if they file it. So right.
And
So in the
I can tell
meantime-
you too, like, had I made an event today that Judge Carol Erskine was to discuss the Karen Reed case, we would have 500 people here watching right now.
Well,
I'm sure of it. That's just the way it works.
I've only done one time. I've only done one podcast on the Reed case. Well, actually
Yeah.
two, because I did one on the motions, but I only done one since after. I mean, the constitutional stuff is interesting to me. I teach constitutional law, so I'm
Where do you teach?
I'm interested. It's a liberal arts college in Worcester, Anna Maria College. It's in the criminal justice master's program. And
I lived in Worcester 20 years. I know Anna Maria.
Yeah,
Actually, I
gonna
believe
say,
Michael Proctor went to Anna Maria.
oh, really? To get his
Yes, he played
master's.
Yeah, a lot of criminology majors go there. Michael Proctor also was on the baseball team there. He was a good baseball player.
Yeah. Oh, wow. A long time ago. Well, this is, right now I'm doing it online because I have students from all over, New England,
Oh, okay.
so,
Yeah.
it's just an interesting subject to me. And it actually came in handy, filing the federal claim on Harmony's case. Yeah, but we can talk about that sometime when they file the Section 1983 claim, because it's in the constitutional realm. Or you can just text me with questions like before.
Yeah,
or you can call
and the whole
me.
the angle that's interested me the most is what's gone on with the federal investigation, and I can give you. We'll talk on the phone, and I'll give you more background on that. I think you'll find it interesting too. But just crazy, unprecedented stuff that's gone on, continues to go on. And that is very complicated.
Yeah, it is complicated. Yeah, you are right.
There was wrongdoing that went on. I'm sure of it. I have evidence of it. But I do think, or at least hope, that the current U.S. attorney is trying to do the right thing, is trying to clean things up. And hopefully you'll see that same impact in the Harmony case, where she's trying to do the right thing. So,
yeah, we hope
we don't know. They have their own Game of Thrones battles that go on within that office too, so it can be very, very political and complicated. And as you know, this part of the problem here was from 2018, and who was in office in 2018. He's back in office now, and he appointed Leah Foley, the current U.S. attorney. So it gets very complicated.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, once you kind of travel into the federal realm, it's a whole different set of rules. As you know, it can become extremely complicated. But as I said, I mean, my sense is, without not wanting to get into the Reed case, because I've never commented on the evidence, but my sense is that they're going to file a Section 1983 claim, over the prosecution and over the investigation, and that's going to open up a whole new set of podcasts, I think. But it's always
we'll have to dig up. We'll have to dig up your old college paper.
Oh my God, I would not want to see that brief.
Paper, your old law school paper.
Yeah, you had to file a brief either in support or against it. I cringe when I think about how that brief was, because when later as an attorney, I was an appellate. I did a lot of appellate law and wrote a lot of briefs, and so I don't like to think back to like the very first ones that I wrote. But it's great talking to you, and you can call anytime, and it's always great to talk to you.
All right, I will do that very soon. Thank you, Judge Carol Erskine. This is Carol Erskine, and again, her book is called A Cruel Injustice: by Carol Erskine, Erskine, and you can find it on Amazon. And she has an author's page website, but also very importantly, she has a website called The Justice File. And this is about her work, and a lot of it is focused on Harmony and on the federal laws and legislation and actions that she's trying to get pushed, very importantly in this case, to hope to try to make sure this doesn't happen again, because that's what we all want. Is for this, we all want to learn what we can from these cases, because that's one way to bring at least some level of justice to Harmony.
Well, thanks, Kevin. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll talk again. So it's always fun to talk to you, either this way or by phone. So, and
Thanks,
stay
Carol.
well. Glad you're doing well.
Will do.
All right, take
Thank you.
care. Bye.